How can you improve the sound of your home 8-track player? How can you do that? I had to say that first because this is going to be a pretty long and involved video, completely unscripted, completely unprepared for. I'm going to be saying everything strictly off the top of my head, just from experience. You're going to hear a lot of uhs and does and probably accidental statements that are incorrect that I might correct and I might not be able to. Just please try to bear with me because this is going to be a long video, but it's an extremely important video for guys who are trying to improve the sound of their 8-track deck. So the first thing I'll say is that 8-track runs at 3 3/4 inches per second. That's a pretty slow tape speed, and the slower the tape speed, the less treble you're going to have. That's just a natural byproduct of tape speed. A faster tape speed always gives you more treble. So the slow tape speed combined with head wear, which also reduces treble, combined with tape wear from repeated playings, which also reduces your treble. There's there needs to be a way to bring that treble out. Now, a tape that doesn't have much treble, it's not completely absent. It's just not at a high enough level for you to really hear it. Now, when you look at like especially back in the 60s and 70s, most of your high-end stereo equipment included a graph of the frequency response, and ideally you want equal response at all frequencies, from the lowest bass to the highest treble. You want your response to be completely flat all the way across the frequency range. So that's why all the graphs that you see that indicates an amplifier or receiver's performance, it's going to be it's going to be for the most part a flat line that'll start to dip at the lower and higher ends when the frequency response tends to drop off. There's only so many frequencies that a certain thing can cover, and that includes fundamentals and harmonics. So okay, I'm going to get away from the scientific discussion and get a little bit more into the layman's terms. The best thing you can do to improve the sound of your 8-track player is to insert an equalizer between the 8-track and your receiver or amplifier. So what is an equalizer? Is basically just a fancy tone control. Everybody knows what a tone control does. If a unit has a single tone control, what it's mostly going to do is just remove the treble as you turn it towards the bass end. They generally don't add bass. They can take it up, but they can't add it because adding a frequency, boosting a frequency requires active electronics, meaning you have to have amplifiers in the circuit, and it has to have power. Now there's two types of equalizers. Most of them are active, meaning that they can cut and boost. Some of the older equalizers are just passive. They can only cut, they can't boost. So you guys all know what a tone control does. You turn it counterclockwise, it reduces the treble. For that reason, almost everyone is going to want their tone control to be all the way clockwise for maximum treble. That's the best that the amplifier can reproduce, and turning it back, turning your tone control clockwise is only going to cut frequencies. It's not going to emphasize anything. So we got that. Now you're also familiar with bass and treble controls. Most high-end receivers have a separate bass and treble control. That divides the frequency range into basically two slices, where you can either cut or boost the bass, and you can also cut or boost the treble. Now, the problem with only having a bass and treble control can be considered a two-band equalizer, and I'm going to get into why it's called an equalizer shortly here. Now, some of your really high-end receivers have a bass, mid-range, and treble control, and we all know what bass and treble is. Treble's high frequencies, bass is low frequencies. But most of your music is actually contained in the mid-range frequencies. That's where your male and female voice resides. That's where most of your guitar work resides. That's where a lot of your keyboard resides. It's where your snare drum resides, and also your tom-toms. They also fall into pretty much the low mid-range category. And then another factor is that AC hum is at a certain frequency, and if all you have is a bass and treble control, you really can't reduce the hum without also taking out a lot of the bass guitar, or whatever's playing the bass, bassoons, contrabassoons, cellos, stuff like that. So what is the most helpful is more frequency bands to adjust. So to that end, going slightly above the bass, mid-range, and treble control is this little, what I call kind of a kiddie version of an equalizer. It's just a little 5-band equalizer. Now, since almost all your equalizers are stereo, any adjustment you make to this channel, you also have to make to this channel. So right there, we're boosting our bass. Here, we're cutting our bass. And then, of course, this is your treble. And then this can be considered your mid-range. And then this will be your low mid-range. Say, for instance, male vocal. This can be your high mid-range, like for female vocal. But keep in mind that there's also instruments mixed in those same ranges. So, but this at least allows us to boost the mid-range to bring out the guitar or the vocal without too much affecting nearby frequencies. So you can, maybe boost the guitar without bringing the vocal. But since we have such a limited number of bands to work with, it's really nice to have even more control over our sound. So this is our little 5-band kiddie version of an equalizer, and then I'm going to go all the way here, and I'm going to show you. This is a 31-band equalizer, and you may not be able to see it. Let me see if I can improve the lighting just a bit. Now this is such a fancy equalizer that it doesn't even have connectors for home audio equipment. It has professional stage connectors, which is either XLR or TRS, tip, ring, and sleeve. These are 1/4-inch phone jacks that are just, like you can plug a guitar into it, a PA system. This type of fancy equalizer is mostly used. I mean, as you can see, this is a professional unit, meaning that it doesn't even have RCA connectors for use with home audio. You would have to actually add them, and it may not even be possible because these are tip, ring, sleeve, which means it's 2 hots plus a ground, whereas your most of your guitars and stuff is basically hot and ground with no with no isolation there. So you may not even be able to add standard RCA jacks to an equalizer like this. It just depends on how it's configured. But the way to explain it is, naturally this divides your audio spectrum into even more. Basically, it's called a 3rd octave equalizer. Now, an explanation of an octave is if you sing the old scale from school, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. The difference between the 2 do's is 1 octave. The human hearing range spans roughly 10 octaves. From the lowest bass tone you can hear, which you really don't even hear, you more feel it than hear it as a vibration, to the highest treble that's possible, which is normally going to be the harmonics from your cymbals and stuff like that. So the main purpose of these fancy 31-band equalizers is in a professional PA system where okay, let me try to remember what I'm talking about here. Okay, so the biggest challenge in a professional music venue is microphones feedback. Instruments generally don't. Now, if you've got a hollow body guitar with a pickup and you're standing close to the amplifier, you'll get feedback. And in fact, Ted Nugent was probably the most skilled person at using controlled feedback. In his earlier recordings with the Amboy Dukes, some of the videos you can see him going right in front of his amplifier and holding his guitar to the speaker to sustain a note. That's called controlled feedback. That's feedback that you want. In his song Stranglehold, in his guitar solo, you hear a few notes that are sustained for just what appears to be endless. I think he sustains a note for like 8 bars, which is impossible to do without using controlled feedback. He knew right where to stand If you stand directly in front of the speaker, you're likely to get a fundamental feedback of the fundamental tone. If you stand at an angle, then it's more likely to feedback at a harmonic of that tone. So now this gets into explanation of harmonics, which I'll do shortly. But first, I'm going to go back to this. And now each room, okay, I'm going to go back to this. Each room, each outdoor venue, each studio, they all have different acoustical environments. Some rooms are really bassy sounding and you need to cut the bass a little bit. If you have, most rooms have parallel walls, which can cause standing waves, meaning that a bass wave can bounce back and forth, between those walls and actually reinforce itself by that constant bouncing back and forth. And then the result is you eventually hear there's a continuous tone, and that's the standing wave continuing to bounce back and forth when it should have died down. If a room has like a little cubby hole, maybe like a food counter that's contained in a separate little square space, then that is going to affect the frequency response of the entire room. You have all kinds of little resonant pockets where certain frequencies can bounce back and forth and reinforce themselves, causing feedback. Obviously your microphones can feed back. Even a note played from an instrument can trigger feedback from a microphone. So now we can move into this. By dividing the frequency band into 31 bands, which basically means a separate control every 3 notes. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol, and on up. You've got control over literally about every 3 notes with this. So in this manner, if you've got a microphone that's feeding back at, say, 2K, that's 2,000 cycles per second, you can cut that frequency to eliminate the feedback without excessively affecting its nearby frequencies. Basically, you can eliminate microphone feedback without taking out a lot of the guitar work or the keyboard work. And that's why this is mainly just for a professional environment. There's not a lot of need for this fancy of a tone control with a home system, but it's an absolute requirement for feedback control. The constant challenge in any venue that that has a band playing at a loud volume, the constant challenge is to get the microphone over the instruments without feeding back. You have to, the vocals have to be the most prominent part of a song, of course, because that tells the story. So you need to be able to get, you can turn the instruments up as loud as you want, and generally they won't feed back. But a microphone, you have to really watch, you got to keep a microphone away from the speakers. You definitely cannot have a microphone in front of a speaker because that's instant feedback. But even in a large venue, you've got your monitor system. That's a speaker like right down in front of the singer, which can feed back if it's too loud. With the microphone, the singer uses floor monitors to hear himself through the microphone over the music. And of course, now the trend now is to use in-ear monitors, which don't feed back pretty much no matter how loud you have them. And then of course your modern equalizers are kind of automatic. They continuously scan for feedback and they cut the feedback automatically. But that's the newer fancy stuff. That's not something that's going to work in your home system. So anyway, getting back to our equalizer, you've got with a 31 band, you've just got so much more precise control over the frequency range. Your AC hum is at 60 hertz, so if you've got a lot of hum, just cut the 60 hertz. Unfortunately, hum also has a harmonic component, which is called ripple. That's at 120 hertz. So you might also want to turn down your 120 hertz if you're getting hum. Doing that will cut the hum and this is called ripple frequency. The harmonic of hum is generally called ripple, and you can cut those 2 frequencies without too much affecting the nearby frequencies. In other words, you can cut the hum without taking out too much of the bass, and by the same token, you can take out a feedback pocket without turning down the keyboards and guitars and stuff like that. So that's why this is mainly just for professional use, because it's necessary. Alrighty, so now I'm going to move on to the type of equalizer that's normally used in a home system, kind of a balance between that first little kitty equalizer and this fancy 31 band. This is called an octave equalizer. It's a graphic equalizer, and this is a 10 band per side, which basically, since the human hearing range covers roughly 10 octaves, you've got a control for each octave. You still got your 60 hertz slider here if you want to cut your hum. You got your, now this is only a 10 band, so its nearest harmonic, 120 hertz ripple frequency, you can also cut that. And then if that affects your bass too much, then you can just turn up the low bass where the hum is not in this area, so you can turn up your bass, after you compensate for the hum. So then by the same token, one thing about 8 tracks, as I've already mentioned, is that they lack treble for the most part. Only, to me, from my experience, only Wollensak and surprisingly Sound Design have a really bright sound. Most of the other home decks, in my opinion, sound just a little bit dull because they lack high frequency response, either from basic design, it could be from headwear and also from tapewear, but all of those are going to reduce your treble response. So with an 8-track tape, what you're going to want to do most is you're going to want to boost your treble. And doing that will make a huge difference in how your 8-track sounds. It's going to make it sound a lot brighter. You can even duplicate the sound of other tape decks. The high-end Akai units, the CR80, CR81, GXR82D, and the CR80D-SS, in my opinion, they all have a little bit of an overproduced sound with too much bass. The treble content is okay, but the excessive bass kind of tends to cover it a little bit. So if this was if I was playing one of the high-end Akai units through an equalizer, I would likely want to reduce my bass response a little bit, maybe even boost my treble. So this is a pretty typical pattern to improve the sound of an 8-track player. Now, naturally, all tapes sound a little bit different. Some have less treble, some have more treble. You're gonna, the more you use this, the more you're gonna reach for it. It's just a matter of getting used to it. Now this is what I'm actually doing on this video is I'm demonstrating the second Pioneer unit that came from Charles, the customer that I mentioned yesterday, who sends me so much work that I decided to give him 2 equalizers because he's got a really discriminating ear, and he knows that his tape decks sound a little bit dull compared to what I can do with a car unit. I can make a car unit have so much trouble that you'd have to back it off. But on a home unit, there's just not a whole lot I can do to improve the original design, compensate for headwear, tapewear, and all that stuff. So one thing that's a good idea, and I'm going to shortly demonstrate this, I'm just about to do it, is the first thing when you get your first equalizer, a good idea is to turn all the sliders down and then raise each one to hear what frequency range that you're manipulating. First thing I'll say is on an 8-track tape, the highest frequency response ever achieved on an 8-track recording deck was around 17K, which is most of that. I mean, 17K. There's just not that much in that area. On an 8-track tape, you're probably going to want to just turn your highest slider. There's no real musical content there. It's mostly just noise and hiss. So with an 8-track machine, you might want to just, okay, let's set this back up for equal response. Basically, with all the sliders in the center position, the response is equal to the equalizer not being in the circuit at all. And so most equalizers have a bypass switch so that you can compare your settings to the original signal and see if you've improved it or degraded it. The bypass switch right here. Most equalizers also have an output level adjustment because when you boost a certain frequency, naturally you boost your overall output. So this output level allows you to make your adjustments but still have the unit play at the same volume. And so, again, the more you mess with this, the more you're going to want to mess with it. Once you get your hands on a fancy tone control like this, you're just not going to be satisfied not being able to adjust a certain frequency to your liking. So what we're going to do, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to familiarize you guys with what frequencies each of these bands covers. Now keep in mind, this is a stereo equalizer. It has 10 sliders for the left channel, 10 sliders for the right channel. So any adjustments you make have to be to both channels. Now naturally you may run into a situation where there's a guitar solo that's all in the left channel. You want to hear it better, so you'll just boost the mid-range in the left channel so you can hear the guitar solo better. But as far as your highest slider, that's mostly just going to be hiss and noise. So with an 8-track deck, you might find yourself just turning this slider down completely to eliminate that that extra bit of disturbance in the music. Likewise, 31 hertz is pretty low for the bass range, and you might not hear too much effect when you're raising and lowering the lowest bass slider, because there's not a whole lot of actual musical intelligence in that range. And finally, the highest note used in music, we'll call it the highest note on the piano, is right at 4K. Everything above that is just harmonics. And what are harmonics? Well, harmonics are what make one instrument sound different from another. There is not there's really no such thing as a pure sound in nature where there's only the fundamental note and nothing more. And be happy about that, because a fundamental note by itself is extremely boring to listen to, and it fatigues the ear really quickly. So that's a good thing. You don't want pure tones in nature, and you generally don't want pure tones in music, because pure tones sound very boring. Listen to your early synthesizer use in recordings. A lot of that was just pure tones, and you'll understand why that type of synthesis is no longer being used, because it's really boring to listen to. So almost everything you hear contains a fundamental note and its harmonics, which are above the fundamental note. The most common harmonic is the octave. Naturally, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Those notes are an octave apart. And so that's a good thing to remember. So now, to familiarize your ear with what each frequency band does, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn them all down. I want to pop a tape in, and I'm going to boost them all separately so that you can hear what general frequency range that this certain slider is affecting. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to turn these all down. And because I had to let these songs play a while to demonstrate the equalizer, I'm actually using my own material. You guys probably don't know that I'm a published songwriter with an album on the market. I don't promote it. I didn't do it for money, and when you look like me, you're not gonna hit any big stages. I just don't have the look to be a musical star. So, but this recording was just taken off of probably the computer on recorded over an Elvis Presley tape, and it was just recorded with a standard home deck, and it sounds really crappy. So it's a good thing to use as a demonstration for how to hopefully maybe improve the sound of some of these songs, and also to demonstrate each individual slider's frequency range without getting nailed for copyright issues, because I'm the copyright holder, and if I get a copyright strike on my own music, I'm going to be pretty pissed off. So let's go ahead and pop a tape, and I think I've got it all set up to go here. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to manipulate each individual slider so you can see what general frequency range they're working with. Start from low. Okay. Boost of the bass. No real difference there. Okay, let's try the next one. Okay, now you're starting to feel it. Now you may not be able to hear it over computer speakers, but this control added some perceptible bass. So let's keep going up the chain. Okay, now you probably definitely heard that. That's getting more into the audible bass. Okay, now we're going to start getting into the low mid-range at 250 hertz. That's a pretty aggravating frequency, but it's needed. Let's keep on going. Okay, we'll wait for the next song to start. Or we could just switch tracks. Okay, now we're going to, jeez. Okay, now we're going to manipulate the 500 hertz slider. Again, an irritating but necessary frequency. Now we're going to go to 1K, which is right in the center of the audio hearing range. I see why you're with him. You deserve much better. Okay. Now these frequencies boosted individually sound like crap. I'm just letting you know which frequency range the sliders are covering. Okay, now we'll move up to 2K. Whoa. Boy, that sounds really horrible. Okay, then we'll keep on going up. 4K. Now this is the highest note on the piano. Just wanted to say, I wish I were the one. So you definitely noticed a big increase in treble when adjusting the 4K slider. That's your highest fundamental note. So now we're going to move up to 8K, which there's no real notes in that range, but you'll hear the harmonics. I could try to talk to you, but it feels a little bit strange. I made some mistakes so long ago, I can't go back. Now you'll notice that added a lot of high treble, but it didn't add any high mid-range because we got all the mid-range stuff turned down. So this is basically for your brightness. So this 8K slider is adding some high treble, which, since there's no actual notes in that range, all you're emphasizing is the harmonic content. So basically you're affecting your overall brightness. Okay, now this last slider, you're probably not going to notice any difference. Different song. You're much needed there. I've got things to finish too, so I can be with you in the next life. Every door opens millions more. Okay, so as you can see, there's hardly any musical content in the 16K range because the tape deck simply wasn't designed to go that high. And incidentally, the human hearing range with a young, healthy ear is 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz per second. That's basically 20 vibrations to 20,000 vibrations per second. That's the overall human hearing range. As we age, our range drops off. Sometimes our range can go down as far as 8K. And so that's another reason to be able to boost your treble is if you're old and your treble response has dropped off, then you can boost that treble and hopefully be able to hear it again. So now that we've covered the individual frequency ranges, I think I can get away, because I can make such a big difference in such a short time. I think I can get away with using my usual Neil Sedaka tape to demonstrate how to make this 8-track sound better. Now this is Charles's Pioneer HR99, and my last two videos covered the HR99 and HR100, so you guys already know what the HR99 looks like. You don't really need to see it. What you need to do is hear it. So what I'm gonna, okay, so I've got it set to flat response, ideally, with the output level set to center, meaning 0 on this equalizer. The equalizer being in the circuit should not make a difference when bypassed. So let's check that real quick. Damn, that's loud. Okay, now what was I trying to do here? Okay, I'm going to just demonstrate how you can instantly bring out more treble on this tape. All you got to do is turn up your 4K and your 8K sliders and check out the difference it makes. Instant treble boost. Without even going inside the unit or doing anything, insert an equalizer between your 8-track and your amplifier, and you can instantly improve the sound. And all I've done is manipulate 2 sliders a little bit, and you can hear the difference it made. Let's check it out again. Instantly, the deck went from not enough treble to more treble than you want, and all you had to do was turn up your treble controls. Now, taking it a step further, you may get some annoying bass rumble, this or that. To fix that, just turn down your bass. Adjust it to your own liking. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's all about what your ears prefer to hear. Myself, I don't really like the overproduced sound of the high-end Akai machines. Now the CR83 is a different type of deck. The CR83 has really good treble response, but your GXR82D, your CR80, CR81, and your CR80DSS, the quad version, they all, in my opinion, have a little bit more bass than I really like to hear. So now keep in mind that you don't always have to boost the treble. Simply cutting the bass can often remove the filtering effect that it has on the treble, and it helps bring that treble out. So you don't always have to boost treble to get more treble. Sometimes you can just cut the bass and you'll have more apparent treble. The human ear is a pretty imperfect device. For instance, it takes 10 times the audio power to get twice the volume to the ear. That's because the human ear has a logarithmic response to volume level, not a linear response. The human ear has a logarithmic response to volume levels. For instance, a passing jet overhead is millions of times more intense than the rustling of leaves, but the human ear can somehow fit it all into its reception range by making it basically a logarithm response. So that's why, like when you hear a unit advertised at 100 watts, it's not twice as loud as 50 watts. The basic audio rules are that it takes 10 times the power to get twice the apparent volume. So if you want twice the volume than your 20 watt amplifier, you want to go with a 200 watt amplifier. That'll give you twice the volume. Yes, going to a 40 watt amplifier from a 20 watt is a 3 dB increase. 3 dBs is regarded as one perceptible change in volume to the human ear. So that's why your graphs, like when you're shopping for receivers or amplifiers, you'll see the response graph, and you'll see that graph go pretty much straight across, but it drops off at the low and high ends because that's the limitations of the circuitry and the design. And once it drops below 3 dB, it's considered not heard. It can be heard, but it's just not as prominent as the other frequencies. So basically, it takes twice the power to get. It takes 10 times the power to get twice the volume. Thankfully, the human ear responds to frequencies fairly well equally and doesn't get too fooled by it. So I think I've already demonstrated the Neil Sedaka tape and how to improve the treble. I'm not going to go too much farther with it because that's all we really needed to demonstrate how to improve the sound of almost any 8-track deck or even any 8-track tape by simply boosting the treble, maybe cutting the bass. Now you may want to go a bit further. You may want to hear the vocals better, so you'll boost the mid-range a bit. You may have an annoying whistle in the music somehow, which you can reduce by turning down some of the treble, which of course will turn down some of the music's treble content too. But at any rate, and then the last thing I need to explain is the reason this is called a graphic equalizer is because, okay, let's just do some adjustments here. Okay, this is an actual graph of the response that you have set on the equalizer. It's identical to how the response would look. Now, The way that they determine a room's resonant pockets and acoustical environment is they use pink noise, which sounds like, and it's an equal mixture of all frequencies. So what they do is they play that pink noise loudly into the room, and then there's a microphone that picks up the response and shows it. It's called a real-time analyzer. It used to cost like $8,000. Now you can find it for free in some of the programs like Audacity. It has a built-in spectrum analyzer. Now it's not a real-time analyzer. You have to wait for the whole song to finish. Then it gives you a basic inventory of the frequencies that it picked up and all that stuff. But now, in the case of adjusting adjusting the equalizer to a room, they play that pink noise loudly through a room. Then there's a microphone that picks it up, and since pink noise is an equal mix of all frequencies, what the microphone picks up is going to show the room's deficiencies. If it has an annoying resonant pocket at a certain frequency, then that frequency will be higher on the spectrum indicator than it should be, and all you got to do is just turn that particular frequency down on your equalizer, and that equalizes the room to equal equal response at all frequencies as much as is possible, given physical limitations. Like, for instance, carpeting absorbs high frequencies. If you're playing in a tight acoustic environment that doesn't have reflective walls, that's going to sound a lot different than playing in a bare room with a linoleum floor, and concrete walls. That room's going to sound a lot different than a heavily carpeted room with draperies, for instance. Also, people absorb high frequencies. As an audience comes in, the high frequency response drops off because people are soft and they absorb high frequencies. Hard surfaces reflect frequencies and cause echoes. So there's just a lot of stuff that an equalizer is used for to compensate for certain deficiencies. You may not even like the sound of a record. All studios have different acoustical environments. All of your Motown recordings have this really nice little reverb in the higher ranges. You can kind of hear the drums echoing just a tiny bit, just enough to give it a nice presence, but not enough to be perceived as an actual echo. And then another thing about studios is they generally have non-parallel walls, like your left and right wall may be angled like this, so that signals cannot bounce back and forth between those walls. They'll hit the wall and they'll echo away from an area that's going to cause it to echo back and forth. So there's just so many things that an equalizer is used for, but in my capacity, the best thing I can do for you guys is to show the simple things you can do to improve the sound of your 8-track machine and to bring out more brightness and treble that's lost either from headwear, tape wear, or just limitations of the basic machine's design. In fact, I mentioned before that the human hearing range for a young, healthy ear is 20 to 20,000 cycles per second. Some of your cheaper, small component decks only go up to 8,000 cycles per second. That's less than half the human hearing range. So on a deck like that, you're definitely going to want to be able to boost the highs, with an equalizer without also boosting the hiss and noise, which occurs usually at a higher frequency than the content that you're trying to hear. So that's I think I've pretty much covered everything. I've kind of explained the use of an equalizer, why it's called a graphic equalizer. There's also other types of equalizers, parametric equalizers, which actually, now graphic equalizers, you can see this slider only works on 1K and its closest nearby frequencies, of course. You cannot change the center frequency. There's no way to make this 1.5K. You have to settle for adjusting the 1K and the 2K in order to affect the 1.5K frequency. Now with a parametric equalizer, they tend to have fewer bands, and that's because you can adjust the center frequency of each band. And so since a lot of stuff doesn't really require a lot of really crazy fancy tone settings like this, you probably couldn't do this with a 4-band parametric equalizer. But for most applications, A lot of times all you really want to do is reduce a certain frequency to get rid of an annoying resonance, or to be able to boost a frequency. Say, for instance, the hi-hats, the drummer's hi-hats not coming through on the verses. So you will, adjust your parametric you adjust your parametric equalizer to the exact frequency of the hi-hat, and then you can boost the hi-hat so you can hear it during the verses. Now your rightmost slider, that's going to be mainly harmonics. That's going to be mainly your cymbals. If you can't hear your cymbals, then you can try boosting that, but keep in mind it's also going to boost hiss and noise. Generally, the more slices you cut the frequency band in, the more slices you cut the frequency range into, the more control you have over individual frequencies. And so, they do make there was, I think it was Techniques that did manufacture a stereo 31 band equalizer for stereo use. And if you can find one, definitely buy it, because that's going to give you the most control over sound manipulation. And it's not just on 8-tracks. You can also use it on vinyl records, reel-to-reel tape, anything that's audio. You can run through an equalizer and change its response. So I'm going to stop here. It's getting to be kind of a long video, and I think I'm probably starting to repeat myself, but I hope I've given you guys a good basic understanding of how equalizers work, and especially how they can be used to improve the sound of a home 8-track deck that's either kind of worn and has gotten a little bit dull sounding, or that simply wasn't designed to sound that great in the first place. All you have to do is stick an equalizer in the circuit, just plug it in between the 8-track and your receiver, or whatever you want to change, whatever you want to change the sound of, and then you've got all this extra control over your sound quality and stuff like that. So, thankfully, I didn't have to play too much of my own music because the recording sounded like absolute crap. But I do have an album on the market. I didn't put it out to make money or to achieve stardom. I put it out just so I can say I'm a decent songwriter and I got an album out. And nowadays, that's all it takes to have an album officially on the market, is to go through a certain company. They'll serve as a distributor for your CD, and they'll get your music on all the major download sites. My name is Barry Phone, last name spelled F-O-N-E, and you can find my music on pretty much any major music download site like Rhapsody, iTunes, Napster. I don't keep track of it because it's something I did back in 2006, I think it was. I did it just to make my mark in the music business, and I don't have much more interest in that. I don't want to be traveling. I'm a homebody big time. I would not make it as a professional musician because I would hate touring. I would hate living out of hotel rooms, and all that stuff. So it was just a way to show the world, hey, I'm a pretty decent songwriter. And the main reason I wrote most of my love ballads was to try to attract a certain female. When you look like I do, you got to hit the heart before they see your face. And I have to admit that my songs have been very successful in achieving that end. Thankfully, women aren't very visual. If you touch their heart, that's pretty much all it takes. If they see that you've got feelings, they're more likely to go, to come after you. But when you look like I do, don't even bother coming up to a woman in person. I hand them my CD, and if they respond positively, that's great. So anyway, that takes care of my discussion of graphic equalizers and why they can be very useful in improving the sound of an 8-track. And now I'm throwing Charles a curve here. This is not the same equalizer that I'm giving him. The ones I'm giving him are actually 12 band, which are a little bit more fancy and have a lot of fancy controls, but he's going to enjoy playing around with it and figuring out what everything does. I'll explain to him the basic settings to use it, but there's a lot more stuff on it that he can play around with, and have some fun with while he's improving the sound of his 8-track. So that's about it for today. This is the only video I'm doing today, and I've just demonstrated his 8-track deck and showed that it works through the equalizer. So that's it for this video. Thanks so much for watching and listening. I hope that you've learned quite a bit from this, and that you'll go out and buy at least a 10-band equalizer to use with your 8-track deck, because a lot of home 8-track decks, after the work that I can do on a car unit, a lot of home 8-tracks don't sound very good to my ears. And so I found it necessary to, and especially since Charles also mentioned, Charles has a very discerning ear, and he notices that his home decks don't sound as bright as the car units that I've taken care of for him. So and again, he's given me so much business and paid extra for early completion on every single job that I just feel obligated to give him these equalizers as appreciation for all the business that he sent me, and also to help him with his with his sound adjustment, and frankly to put the control of sound in his hands, so that he's got more control over his overall sound. So you can tell that I'm just rambling, incessantly and not saying too much. So I'll end it now. Thanks so much for watching, listening. Thank you, Charles, for giving me a good reason to finally do this. This is a project that I've wanted to do on video for years and just never got around to it. Finally, I have a customer that is looking for a way to improve the sound of his home deck. So this was a good time to make that video and to kind of show off my audio knowledge, I guess, to an extent. I'm not an audio expert by any means, but I know more than most of your average users of 8-track machines, so that takes care of that. Thanks so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you guys next time.